Hi there, and welcome to the Creative Operations Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Groome, and in this podcast, we'll be talking with creative operations leaders in all kinds of industries, from franchising to finance, from healthcare to hospitality and beyond. We'll be looking to uncover best practices and to see trends that are coming to help you keep your creative operations on brand and on budget at the same time. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Creative Operations Podcast 2.0. I'm your host, Kevin Groome, and we're going to be quick today. In fact, we're going to be quick going forward. We've learned from some of our listeners that even our effort to make these lunch-size sort of podcasts, that less is more. So today we're going to talk about something for all you damn managers out there. A long time ago, one of our customers referred to themselves as an accidental digital asset manager. It wasn't something they'd been trained in. All of a sudden, they found themselves managing an application with thousands of users, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of assets, and no training, no orientation as to how to define success, much less how to achieve it. So today we're going to talk about that aspect of running a dam successfully. And of course, for a dam, as for any piece of software, one of the key metrics is user adoption. So today, and I hope in less than 10 minutes, we're going to talk about, number one, what should you define as your benchmarks for user adoption? Number two, how can you measure not just the level of user adoption, but its success, the effectiveness of your dam in serving your users' needs? And then finally, we'll talk about how do you manage within that definition of success over time. 3 quick tips, things you can take away and hopefully apply immediately. So let's begin. When it comes to defining adoption of a dam, usually we speak in terms of percentages. Those users who are registered on the system as accounts, and those users who actually use the system over any period of time, any given period of time. For our purposes today, let's use 3 periods of time: 1 month, 3 months, and 1 year. What we've seen over the course of about 20 years in the dam business is that 1 month adoption rates have a range. Below 25 or 30%, you're in trouble. Above 40%, you're doing really well. So here's a great thing to do. Every month, at least once a month, take a look at your user base and get a sense of who your registered users are. Let's say that you've got 100 users on your dam. Then use your tools reporting systems to decide how many of those users have actually logged in and conducted a meaningful transaction during that month. If it's lower than 25%, there's some steps you should take to improve adoption. And if it's over 40%, you're actually doing relatively well on a 1 month basis. Even though that number might sound low to management or to somebody else, 40% and up is actually a pretty good adoption level. Here's why I say that. In most cases, a dam is not a daily tool. It's not like email. It's not like your Word or Office environment. A dam is used by most users in a distributed dam environment occasionally, not daily. That's not always the case. Every company's different, but I would use those as broad parameters. Let's move to 3 months. So you've got a whole quarter of time you're thinking about here. Your lows and highs here, below 40, you're probably in a little bit of trouble. Above 60 or 65, you're doing pretty well. And then finally, 12 months. If you have less than 2/3 of your registered users accessing the dam over the course of an entire year, you probably, again, have some issues to look into. And if you're approaching 90% or even getting above 90%, you'll find that I believe you've got really, really good success. In fact, we've seen with some of our customers adoption rates over 100%. And that's because over the course of a year, new folks sign in and other folks leave. And so you could find yourself as you deactivate users with an adoption rate on a 12-month basis that's over 100%. Might sound like a pipe dream, but it's achievable. Now, knowing the percentage of active users to registered users is a good thing. In fact, if I'm talking with dam managers and they don't have an off-the-cuff sense of that, I wonder how well they're really paying attention to activity on the dam. And there's enormous value in doing this, so it doesn't take too long. So I would get that sense of active users to registered users, that ratio. But of course, that's not enough. Here's the next thing you need to do. You need to look at the effectiveness of a session on your dam. That is, when a user logs in, do they actually get some work done they really needed to get done? Here's how I like to measure it. Two metrics that I would use. One, the ratio of transactions. That could be downloads, that could be documents generated, that could be emails sent, that could be assets that have been shared with outside users. So the number of transactions relative to the number of sessions that you've had on the system. So if we had 1,000 sessions and we had 1,000 transactions, we'd have a 1-to-1 ratio. Here's what we've seen. Again, this is across decades of experience with DAM and across many different company sizes. So think of these as ballparks, but at least indicative, so that you can define for yourself a metric that makes sense. When we see that there's at least 1 to 2 transactions per session, we know we've got a pretty good healthy DAM. If we find that our transactions are actually lower than our sessions, it usually means we need to look at either our keywording, our corporate taxonomy, our structure of categories and subcategories in the DAM, or some other aspect of the user experience. When your transaction rate is lower than your total sessions, then you probably have a user experience issue you want to look at. Don't panic. There are broad ranges here. We've seen successful DAMs that have, transaction rates that are lower than login rates. But in general, we see health when we see it above 1, approaching 2, often getting to 3. In one of our customer environments, this is in a dealer-based system in the home improvement industry. On an average monthly basis, we see 3 transactions per session. And we have seen that system now running for close to 10 years at those levels. And so we think that that's a sign of good health. Now, you have a sense of what your percentage adoption rate is. You have a sense of how effective your session is. The next thing you have to ask yourself is, how pleasant is the user experience? How efficient is the user experience? And here's how we measure that. Real simple. One of the classic old web metrics, page views. Take your number of transactions that you've conducted on your DAM over any given time period and compare it to the number of page views that your DAM has seen over that same time period. Here's what we found. If you've got more than 10 page views for a transaction, you've probably got a user experience problem. If you have page views that are 3 times the number of transactions, you're probably doing really well, because a user has managed to come to the homepage, conducted a search, found the asset they're looking for, executed a transaction with it, shared it, downloaded it, transformed it, and done all of that in just 3 page views. That's solid. So think about a range between 3, really good performance, 10, which I think would be a frustrating user experience, and use those as broad parameters. So if you have low user adoption, you're going to want to look both at your users' total sessions and transactions that they're conducting and the number of page views that it takes them to get done what they need to get done. Now, one last tip, and then we'll bring this to a close because we've probably already given you more information than is easy to digest. How do you make sure that you're monitoring and managing your user adoption effectively? This is something that we've learned as a SOC 2 company. We've learned a lot about this, and it has to do with doing user audits. Even the phrase user audits makes me want to yawn. And I'm sure it makes you want to yawn too, but it's a really important discipline to get in the habit of. Think about doing it at least once a year. If you're really ambitious, think about doing it 2 or 3 times a year. Here's how it works. Grab your user list from your DAM, go to your admin area and find the user list and export it. And hopefully, if it's a good DAM, it's going to be able to, in that export of data, it's going to tell you when was a user created, when was the last time they logged in. At the very least, it should tell you that. And if it tells you that, now you can sort that user base by the date of their last use of the system. And here's what I would do. I would take all the users who have not accessed the system in a certain period of time. For us, with many of our customers, it's at least a year. So we'll take all the users who haven't logged in this year, and we're going to send them an email in which we say, do you still want access to the DAM? You will be surprised and impressed how many people will respond to that email and say, yes, indeed, they do. And here's the second step. For those users who don't respond and say, yes, indeed, they want continued access to the DAM, deactivate them. Your platform should give you the ability to retain the user record, but to deactivate access. It's kind of a negative opt-in option. What we're trying to do is to encourage our users to raise their hands and say they really need access to the dam. If you can get them to do that, here's the benefits that come from your user audit. First, your total base of registered users goes down a little bit for those folks that you've deactivated. And all of your adoption numbers start to look a little better. You're getting a more accurate and realistic view of user adoption. And here's the second thing. This is a little sneaky, but I really like it. When I ask a user if he or she wants access to the dam and they raise their hand and say yes, I've interrupted their day, it's true. But I've also reminded them of a valuable corporate tool that we have spent time and money organizing and maintaining for their benefit. And this gives me the opportunity to communicate with them, to offer them a training session, to at the very least send them some training materials that they might not recall since it's been some time since they last accessed the dam. Simple things, user audit with some enhanced training opportunities at the end. And don't forget, you want to establish your benchmarks. When I gave those numbers before, about 30% to 90%, those are very broad ranges. Your organization will have its own numbers, but you won't know what those numbers are unless you take the time to look at your usage statistics and then manage user adoption upward over time. That's it for today. Thanks for spending some time with us. As I said, we're going to try and keep these tight and useful in terms of episodes for you going forward, both with our guests and when we're doing these one-on-ones. So thanks very much, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Creative Operations Podcast 2.0.